I think there's only 3 subscribers on the account. Whoops.
You actually had 4 when I went to
There
there
was
was 8 when I
9.
went.
Oh, maybe radicals. Okay. Well, you guys go on here next.
You're more famous than you think.
Yeah. Oops. Let's do this. Okay. So if I have a quadratic equation, I'm just going to use one that's going to work. I know it works. Okay, now I'm looking for, the first thing that I do is I try and factor, because factor is the easiest way to go about solving this question. So obviously this one would factor, it'd be x minus 3, x plus 2, and we get our solution. But if there's no factoring, no graphing method of doing this, okay? So I can't use graphing, I can't use factoring, and it doesn't factor. All right, then I'm going to use the quadratic equation. So we all remember what the quadratic equation is. To find my roots, it's minus b plus minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now, there is one difference. We did this in applied, but there is one difference or one extra thing that I have to look at that I want to show you that we didn't do much of, and that is focus on what we call the discriminant right here. So the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. Okay? Bless you. Okay. So b squared minus 4ac. Now, what happens if this becomes a negative number in here? What if there's a negative number in there? What is the square root of any negative number? Can we take the square root of a negative number? Let's put it that way. What's the square root of negative 4? Error. Yeah, that's exactly right. There isn't one. Okay? You can't have a square root of a negative number. So, if this discriminant is less than 0, meaning it's a negative number, that means that there are no roots. So essentially, when I'm looking at a parabola, that's what it may look like. That or that down there. Okay? It doesn't actually cross the x-axis, so there's no roots. So if that discriminant value is a negative number, it means that there are no roots. If b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, so let's say that this all works out to 0. So I have plus minus 0 then. What am I left with if this is all 0 on this side? What am I left with? If b squared minus 4ac equals to 0, what am I left with on top of that fraction? Negative b. And then the bottom is still 2a, right? So then that means that I have minus b over 2a, which is a rational number, which is actually one real root. So example of that would be this. In which your vertex is on the actual axis. So if your discriminant equals 0, you have one real root. Okay? If b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, I'm going to have 2 roots. Now, if it's a perfect square, if it works out to a perfect square, I have what we call 2 real roots. All right? If it's not a perfect square, like the square root of 5, I would have 2 irrational roots. So you would end up with, an example of that would be like minus 3 plus minus square root 5 over 2, let's say. This would be an example of 2 irrational roots. So on a calculator, it would give it to you. By using this, you want to leave it in that form. All right? So those are the 3 possibilities. No roots, 1 root, 2 roots, and it's all based on b squared minus 4ac. Okay? So let's solve for this one then. I've got x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. So the first thing I do If I can't factor it, the first thing I do is I write out A, B, and C. What's A? 1. What's B?
-1.
-1. What's C?
-6.
-6. Okay, so let's use our roots. So I've got negative, substitute in -1, plus minus, the square root, b squared. So that's -1 squared minus 4 times 1 times 6. -6, sorry. That's negative. Did that very well. Try that again. -6. Like that, over 2 times 1. Okay? Negative b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So far, so good? All right. -1 is just 1. So I got 1 plus minus the square root of 1. Subtract 4 times -6. So that's like 1 plus 24, which is 25 over 2. What is the square root of 25? 1 plus 5 plus minus 5 over 2. 1 plus 5 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 1 subtract 5 is
4.
-4. -4 over 2 is -2. There's my answer. Okay? If I factored that, I'd get this. By factoring, same thing. Okay? So when do I use this? When I'm told I can't graph it, and it doesn't work out as a fact, it doesn't factor.
How do you get a -2?
On this one or this one?
Either that one.
Okay. So it's 1 subtract 5, which is -4.
Okay.
-4 divided by 2 is -2. Right here, x plus 2, what's going to make this 0 in here? Okay? Okay, so far? Okay, let's do, I just want to see how many we got to go through here. Let's look at page 175, working example 2b. So I got 3x squared. The first thing I need to do in all these questions is, get it equal to 0. All quadratics, when you're solving for roots, you need to get it equal to 0. All right, now, 3 times 3 is 9. Are there any factors of plus 9 that can give me -8? What are the factors of plus 9? Yeah, 9 and +1. 3, right? Or -3, -3, and -9, -1. So there's no way I can get this factored. If that was a -3, then I could factor it to -9 and +1, but I can't. Okay, it's not a negative. So I got to use my quadratic equation. A is 3, B is -8, C is 3, right? X equals -8 squared, or sorry, -8 plus minus b squared, 64 minus 4 times 3 times 3 over 2 times 3. 8 plus minus 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 3 is 36. 64 subtract 36. Sorry. 64 subtract 36. 28. So I have the square root of 28 over 6. All right, now, normally I'd say, okay, just leave it like that. But those of you that peeked ahead in chapter 5, we're working with radicals. So it would be a good time to get started with working with them now. So I've got 8 plus minus. The square root of 28 is not a perfect square, is it? Is there a perfect square that goes into 28? 4 does. How many times does 4 go into 28? 7 times. So the square root of 4 is 2, square root 7 over 6. Now here's the thing. I have a fraction right now. All right? I'm going to reduce this fraction. I'm going to divide all my values by 2. So that gives me 4 plus minus root 7 over 3, and that's how I see your final answer. Then take your calculator out, punch that into your calculator, and check your answer. So graph that and find out your zeros.
Do you have to use brackets or something?
Sorry?
Do you have to use brackets?
For this?
No, like, to put in your calculator.
I don't want this. I want this in your calculator. I want you to graph the equation.
And we want to find the roots.
Find your zeros. Yeah, yours is roots. Theirs is zeros. All right, give me the first one. What do you got? Is this the left one or the right one?
Left one is 0.451.
0.451, perfect. Find the right one.
2.215.
2.215. Okay. So far, so good. Now, here's what I want you to do. Punch this into your calculator. 4 add root 7 equals divide by 3. 4 plus root 7, hit equals, and then divide by 3. And what do I get?
2.215.
So I got that one right. Okay. Now go 4 subtract root 7, hit equals, divide by 3.
0.451.
What is it?
0.451.
0.451. I have no problems with you doing this. You show me the work, and then you check it with your graphing to make sure you got it right. That's all good. All right? Okay? Questions? Okay. So our time is getting crunched. So I am suggesting we get done this 4.4 for tomorrow. All right? I would really like to see us test this Wednesday in the hopes that we're going to have class Wednesday. Okay? So that's that we want to get this, we want to get through this and test on it before we go into this big break. Because otherwise you're going to have to do 3 unit tests as soon as you get back from the break. Okay? So I am going to give you, I think I wrote up an assignment actually for you. So I'll see if I have that. I'll print it off. I'll print off a pre-test as well. All right? Okay. Work then.